You're listening to Catching Wildfire, a podcast by the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association. Welcome to Catching Wildfire. My name is Jeff Johnson. I am a retired fire chief from Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue and past president and executive director for the Western Fire Chiefs. And also, I've been very active in the formation and the support for the First Responder Network Authority, known as FirstNet. And today I am fortunate to have with me the national treasure, Chief Kim Zagaras, who was the head of Cal OES for 18 years and literally a fire god in the world of operations and wildfire. Chief Zagaras is a senior policy advisor for the Western Fire Chiefs, and really he is a mentor to so many of us. And Chief Z and I are joined today by Max Brodie from Rain. And Max, would you do us the honor of telling us about yourself and like how did we get here? Like what is rain and how did you get here? And let's maybe we just talk a little about that.
For sure. Well, Chief Johnson and Chief Zagaras, thank you so much for the invitation to have this conversation with you today. I know it's a great privilege to be here and to be, quite frankly, walking in the footsteps of innovation that you both have charted over the past decades. So, how did I get into this world and doing this thing, autonomous wildfire response? Well, it really began as a kid growing up in the interior of British Columbia, Canada, which is a high wildfire risk region. And very often in the summers, the valley where I lived would get socked in with smoke from fires until one summer the fire actually came to our hometown. And it started like many fires do. It started with a lightning strike on a single tree that no one was able to get to. It was in the middle of the night. Someone actually spotted it from across the lake, but still, no one was able to get there. The sun rose, the winds picked up, and then 3 days later, the army was called in. 30,000 people were evacuated, and it went down in history as the largest mass evacuations in Canada since the Second World War at the time. And so I just remember as a 12-year-old kid, standing on our cedar roof with my dad, nailing a soaker hose and leaving the water dripping, hoping that that would somehow prevent our home from burning to the ground, while the police officer is at the bottom of the driveway with a megaphone ordering us to leave that we could hear but not see because the smoke was so thick. And that is something that I have never forgotten and I've carried with me my whole life. And when you're a kid, you just ask, why, right? Like, why was no one able to get there? Why did it take so long? And what if, I mean, I was one of the kids who were like dreaming about, electric cars and spaceships and such. And so it just seemed like obvious and simple that if you were able to pre-position an aircraft, I didn't have that language back in the day, but if you were to have a rapid response aircraft located close to where the fire started, that you might have a chance of getting there before it grew out of control. And that was always just with me over the preceding decades, in which I had the wonderful opportunity to relocate and move to here, Silicon Valley in California, with my last startup, and then it was taking a year off after I completed that company, and I was right in the middle of the 2018 campfire here in California, and I just all came completely rushing and flooding back to me, like that this is happening all over again at an even greater or larger scale. And that question just came back to me, like, what would it take to be able to get there fast enough? And that was really the moment where I, along with some friends, started doing a deep dive into what would be possible with the current state of technology. What would be possible with early detection? What would be possible with aircraft autonomy? Could this actually work? And we just went very methodically and started, checking all the boxes. Oh my gosh, yeah, the regulations that could support this. Oh wow, there's this mature autonomy technology that's been coming out of the Department of Defense for the past 15 years. Like we can leverage and build on that. And so, I mean, that's a really long way of kind of how of saying like how we got to in 2019 launching the company to do autonomous wildfire response. And for the past, what now, 6, almost 7 years, have been championing that and bringing that forward in the industry. And we're just so excited to see everything that has happened over the past few years in support of this category of technology and the possibilities that it can unlock. So.
And Max, what kind of aircraft are you talking about? When you talking about autonomous response and aircraft, are you talking about drones, or are you talking? What are you talking about?
In a way, yes, large drones, effectively. So, when going back to kind of that checklist of things that we were going through when we were starting the company, what's the state of early detection? What's the state of the regulations? What's the state of aircraft autonomy technology? We also did a super deep dive into the physics of fire and understanding how quickly do fires grow, particular the ignitions that cause catastrophic damage, which are very typically wind driven. And we very quickly realized that any form of rapid intervention in the fires, the extremely small percentage of fires that cause the vast majority of damage, 2% of ignitions, consuming 67% of suppression budgets, any sort of response to those types of fires would require a very substantial amount of water or suppressant payload capacity. We're talking thousands of gallons, not hundreds of gallons. And then layered on top of that, if you actually want to navigate in the types of wind conditions and be able to deliver that type of payload capacity, you're going to need a lot of energy density. So uh, that is how we very quickly realized that, okay, we were talking about autonomous aircraft, specifically autonomous helicopters here, as opposed to small battery powered uncrewed aerial systems.
That's interesting. How do you see autonomous aircraft shaping the future of wildfire operations?
It's an important question because I think a lot of folks, when they take a look at our vision and where we see the long-term potential of this technology, uh, pre-positioned autonomous aircraft that are stationed in remote areas, ready to rapidly intervene, and yeah, going straight back to my experience as a child, like that is not the first step to introducing this technology into service. Uh, we see the first step of introducing this technology into service as being on a dedicated branch of a mature fire, it, deconflicted with all other aircraft, perhaps a branch that wouldn't otherwise receive resourcing. And this is really to build the trust and confidence in the technology within the community in a real world operational setting. And then from there, it can expand into more integrated settings where human piloted aircraft are working collaboratively with autonomous aircraft in shared airspace, which is a major milestone that we all need to get to before we can then progress towards initial attack or having autonomous aircraft respond on initial attack. And of course, this is an extremely high level overview. There's many milestones throughout this process, but that is the roadmap that we see. Um, and I do also want to clarify one other, I would say, common misconception around autonomous aircraft. Autonomy does not equal uncrewed. You can have autonomous aircraft uh, with human pilots on board that are supporting workload reduction for that onboard crew, in much the same way that you have driver assistance systems on board, are all on board recent make and model vehicles and cars and trucks. So we see autonomy as bringing value to the existing human piloted response operations in the form of expanding the response envelope, being able to perhaps operate in conditions that may otherwise be considered unsafe, being able to expand night response capacity, uh, being able to reduce workloads so that instead of having to actively manage an aircraft with two hands and feet, you can issue high level objectives. It can take care of the water dip, these things that otherwise might cause task saturation on board the aircraft. So that is like a one key misconception I do want to clear up, that autonomy does not equal uncrewed. It can perform in an assistive role for today's existing human piloted operations as part of a broader roadmap towards expanding overall wildfire response capacity.
Chief Zagaras, tell us a little bit about how air ops works today and how you would see Max's concept of how you begin integrating this into wildfire ops. How do you see that?
I think the harder part really out of any of this is is really acceptance in the aviation of allowing this to happen. And like, like anything in air service, it's slow to change in some areas that they probably need to move more. But I really think we're already seeing it, just in the smaller drone world. And I mean, we're going to watch this summer as they're going to be dropping water there and five water dropping drones. But I think coordinating with different agencies, I know he's working, with Muncie down there, Sedina, that they're on a very path of, getting people to accept what we're trying to do. There's already been work, I think, Max, working with the military in some of this area. I mean, with the Black Ops, and I mean, it's really pretty amazing to see where you're headed.
Thank you, Chief Z. Yes, it is. I step back every now and then and just go, wow. I mean, how far this has come, and the community that we've been able to build around this technology is just so impressive, and I'm just so grateful to be helping shepherd this through and to transition into real world operations. It is true that we do work very closely with fire agencies. We absolutely do not want to be building technology in a vacuum. It is so important to have that continuous feedback loop with fire professionals. Um, and we've found some great supporters and innovators along the way. Certainly, Chief Munzie in San Bernardino being one of them. Chief Fennessy, formerly at Orange County, another strong supporter of the overall category of autonomous wildfire response technology. And so, I think what really, as you noted, Chief, like the moment is now. Like this is happening. This is here, and the key milestones that are next are continuing to have opportunities to familiarize the community with the technology.
Max, like in the military, they have AWACS that are, air control and tracking all the resources. And at the terrestrial level, they have things like ProSay technology, et cetera.
Mhm.
How do you see tracking the aircraft on task and while loitering? How do you see them integrating with manned aircraft, as it were, and or crewed aircraft? How do you see them keeping track of each other and making sure that we don't have mid-air conflicts?
A fantastic question. So, our general approach in introducing something new is to change as little as possible about the existing procedures. And so, uh, and especially through working with our advisors, we have a pathway to introducing this technology into the fire traffic area without changing any fire traffic area procedures. And to be clear, um, we were just speaking about assistive autonomy with human pilots on board on a pathway to uncrewed autonomy. The scenario where human pilots are on board is that's simple. They just do exactly the same thing. What I'm about to speak about now is how this works when we get to uncrewed. Um, so when we're talking about uncrewed autonomy within the fire traffic area, uh, the way it works, that's completely compatible with the existing procedures, is instead of the human pilot being on board the aircraft, the human pilot is on the ground. And instead of the VHF radio transmissions uh, going to the aircraft, when they arrive at the aircraft, we relay them by satellite to the ground operator, who is then able to speak over headset with other aircraft in the fire traffic area as though they were on board the aircraft. And so it's just shifting where those communications happen by rebroadcasting over a satellite connection. And then in terms of what that ground operator is able to command, they're able to command all of the same patterns that you would otherwise be flying if you were on board that aircraft in the fire traffic area.
That's fascinating. So, you faced a lot of challenges. I can only imagine that raising money for this initiative was part of it. Having the vision for it was part of it. Getting some real world tests and dropping the, creating some acceptance within the aerial fire community is part of it. Uh, Of all the challenges you've faced, what are some of the biggest challenges?
Mm, mhm. Where to begin? Um, I would say I'll say that the most interesting challenges tend to be chicken and the egg problems. Um, and so, for example, there aren't procurement pathways for autonomous wildfire response until the capability is demonstrated. But you can't motivate investment to demonstrate until there's confidence in procurement pathways, right? And so many things remain in stasis or don't move forward because of this category of problem of the chicken and the egg problem. And so, much of the challenge comes from how do you solve that? In general, like the way you have to solve that is with some faith, right? You have to solve it with vision. You have to solve it with faith. You have to solve it with first principles of and conviction around what the future is going to be and why it's better and why it's safer and why it's more cost effective and why it's going to improve the lives of communities. And so uh, we we do this by finding other innovators, right? We That's how we found Chief Munsey. That's how we found Chief Fennessy. It's quite frankly how we found you. It's by looking for the people who are predisposed towards wanting that future, and who can see and come along with and even add their own elements to that vision. Um, and that's how we get things done. That's how we've managed to solve chicken and the egg problems over the past several years.
It's incredible how far you've come in such a short time. And these are daunting things. Sometimes when I talk about change in the fire service, I'd like to characterize it as the most difficult thing you can do is bring a completely new orientation to the profession,
Mhm.
and where there's already a historically anchored, tradition-based process going on. Like, so you have organic resistance based on how we used to do it and how we currently do it. And along comes a new idea that flips that on its ear. That's actually more difficult than coming along with a new product, service, or offering, and there's no inherent historical or traditional anchor, because now you have to overcome people's resistance and perspectives.
Mhm.
There's people currently doing those jobs, and they're saying, "Wow, what about me?" I mean, these are very real human emotions and very real things to overcome. What's been your experience in that area?
When you're as soon as you started talking about this, the phrase that comes to mind is uh, the space has no constituency. Uh, in just speaking to like some technologies being easier to move forward in the space, satellite context than than on the ground. And it is so true. I mean, one of the fascinating things about wildfire and public safety is that there are so many shared stakeholders, or there's so many, it's so many domains of shared responsibility. And what happens when you enter into these spaces of shared responsibility, you get all sorts of, challenging dynamics, which, have, going straight back, hundreds of years, to the tragedy of the commons, which was this concept out of Great Britain, which was who was responsible for the commons, who was responsible for the land which we all use for our sheep. And there's so many different, well, there's two major perspectives on this. Either you let everyone act of their own incentives, or you come up with kind of rules and procedures around how we share the commons. And when you have a shared resource and you have shared response models, you put in rules like jurisdiction, who's responsible for what, and uh, it creates systems. But the challenge always with systems is how do you innovate in the context of systems that become increasingly rigid over time. Um, so I never imagined when we first started working on this that this would be one of the most, uh, you know, the source of many of the challenges that we've faced. But it makes sense. It's just it nevertheless remains a challenge.
Well, I would imagine that there's some homeland security issues floating around in an autonomous aircraft, right? Operating without flight crews that someone can call. Of course, you can call them in the model you described.
Certainly, there's all sorts of I mean, cybersecurity and standards that we have to adhere to ensure that these systems remain under the command of those who they should be. Absolutely.
Chief Seat?
Max, what does the timeline look like for broader adoption for autonomous aircraft? And when might we begin to see the implementation in the field as you're working through the piloting?
That is the question. That's what we get that question a lot. And I would say, first off, two things. Number one, it is all about building the comfort, familiarity with the technology, with the fire community, and with operators. And number two, it is about those procurement pathways and ensuring that demos just don't end in demos. Because the hard reality is that, you know, this is not the first time that optionally piloted helicopters have been attempted to be introduced into the wildfire response world. I mean, this was first attempted back in 2013 by Mark Bathrick, who was then the director of the Office of Aviation Services at the Department of Interior. And different aircraft, different airframe. It was a K-Max, not a Black Hawk. And he did a demo. It was attended by 100 people in Boise, but it never progressed beyond demo, and it was because of the procurement pathways. So, this time around, of course, like the technology has advanced tenfold. I mean, it is far more capable. But does it matter if there are not procurement pathways to field it? And so, the two things that we focus on are building comfort and familiarity with the technology within the fire agencies and the operator community, and ensuring that there are procurement pathways. And then in the middle of that, we introduce these opportunities for getting hands-on, demonstrating, doing deployments in real world environments. It's a process. It's not one and done. But I'm excited for some familiarization and training opportunities that we anticipate that we will have later this year in the fall. So closer than ever before.
Yeah, I think Dan Muncy, likes to put it is, we don't have a problem with technology. We have a problem with adoption. And that really comes to, finding leaders that are actually look at things and are willing to take some risks to move the needle. And I think that's where we're actually at, probably more than anything, whether it be with the autonomous aircraft or with drones. We just got to continue to move that needle.
Yep. I would 100% agree.
Max, I'm guessing that you're taking a look at cooperative purchasing models for your procurement.
Mhm.
Sourcewell is the preeminent. That is the ultimate cooperative purchasing in the United States in the public safety community. And once you win a contract on that, that's good nationwide, and federal, state, and local can all procure off it. I'm sure you're looking at those kinds of tools.
We certainly are looking at different ways of sharing costs among vested stakeholders. Certainly the utilities have an interest in mitigation, but they're not solely responsible. We've been able and have had some success in pulling together a consortium of interested or vested stakeholders in wildfire mitigation to do just that. And so I think that is going to continue.
Max, what needs to change from our current operations to enable rain ops as you envision it?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, just going back to when we were talking about the fire traffic area, our goal is to change, first of all, nothing, and then very few things if needed. Um, I would say that in order to get to that initial milestone of fielding an aircraft on a dedicated branch of a mature fire, We've got a lot of the pieces already in place. You have aircraft like that. If you're already talking about a campaign fire, mature fire, you've got a temporary flight restriction, so you have ownership over the airspace. Public agencies have the authority to field these aircraft under public use rules, and then it's really just up to the HELCO or the Air Tactical Group Supervisor to manage airspace deconfliction using standard voice radio communications, as we discussed. Depending on which agency has jurisdiction for that first campaign fire that it's being introduced on, there will need to be a carding process and procedures that are established for autonomous aircraft. That is not currently in place. But compared to the other lifts around aviation regulations and dedicated airspace, we at least see it as a smaller problem to solve with the right leadership.
Max, I love your characterization of the commons. The equivalent of that in the United States was the 1934 Taylor Grazing Act, where much of the West was grazed cooperatively. And then as tensions started to flare over who was getting too much and who was getting too little, it resulted in the Taylor Grazing Act. And I think there is a lot of wisdom as you use that kind of mindset to think about the space that you're in, and just making sure that you do as you are doing, which is to tread carefully and to listen and to integrate and to embrace all the people that would be touched by this. I thought Waymo was ways with their autonomous driving cars, as you know, probably better than anybody. They put a driver in the car. It was autonomous, but they had a driver sitting there. So I was impressed with your insight on that.
Well, thank you, Chief. And I'd say, you know, the thing that folks may react to when they think about this future of autonomous uncrewed aircraft uh, is that it seems so far out. At one point we had a visitor here at Rain HQ, and they said, "Oh, we're not sure if it's going to happen, or we're sure this is going to happen, but we're just not sure if it's going to happen, 100 years or 10 years." And I'd just like to encourage everyone to remember and imagine what is possible when you get the right people together and drive towards something. Your example of Waymo is a fantastic example. If you have not taken a Waymo, go to a city that has Waymo and take a Waymo. It is an example of the future already being here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. Um, and when we look at aircraft autonomy, it's another perfect example. This has been under development and under maturation in the Department of Defense context over the past 15 years. We are privileged to be able to bring that over to a public safety context. But again, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And yes, there are things we need to work out, but the important thing to remember is what we are capable of when we have a goal and we drive towards it. Watch a video of a SpaceX rocket landing back on the landing pad, and ask yourself, if that is possible, why can't we use autonomous uncrewed aircraft to put out fires before they grow out of control? So I will leave it with that.
Do you learn lessons from the battlefield with the various types of uncrewed aircraft there?
So there is a lot of commonality and overlap in how what the military folks refer to as the kill chain, and what we refer to as the suppression chain. There's commonality around being able to issue high level intent and being able to identify a fire as it is moving, being able to develop plans, in our case, being able to develop suppression plans, being able to do effective targeting and tracking. All like there are commonalities between the domains, for sure.
And Max, but just think about the broad audience that we serve from all ranks and all years of experience. What is it that you would like to wrap up today telling us that we may not know?
What we really seek and strive to bring is an open approach to engaging with the community. We are here at the former Alameda Naval Air Station, and like we love it when fire professionals come visit us. And, it's a fun tour. Please reach out. I am very cognizant that this technology can feel scary. It can feel, uh, you know, unsafe. And I really want to make it approachable to the fire community. And so please, if you are in town, do drop us a line.
Max, I've been in this business spraying water, chopping holes, and shocking people since 1978. And I remember when it was weird to wear breathing apparatus. And I
Mhm.
remember when it was weird to have emergency medical technicians.
Mhm.
And I remember when it was weird to have thermal imaging cameras and cell phones and on and on and on. I would like to think that with the current generation of fire professionals that we're servicing today, that they're while maybe cautious and maybe to Chief Zagaras's point, maybe we're slow adopters as a profession, but I'd like to think that they're a little more uh, tech friendly and a little more open. And I loved your example of that Starlink rocket landing back in the pad. You talk about a wow moment. That was one. But I just want to thank you for innovating, innovating on behalf of this country, innovating on behalf of the fire community, and taking bold risks. These require patient investors and visionary leaders, and it is clear that you have both. So I just want to thank Max Brodie from Rain for joining us today on Catching Wildfire, and we look forward to seeing you all back in our next episode. Thank you again.
Thank you, Chief Johnson. Thank you, Chief Z.